Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
So let's read verse 11 again out loud. But the next verse, so Moshe gives his initial response at the burning bush. Vayomer Moshe el ha Elohim, correct. We'd focus on the ha. Moshe said to God, I'll just translate God, Mi anochi, who am I? Ki elech el paro, that I will go to Pharaoh, that I should go to Pharaoh. V'chi otzi et bnei Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, and that I should go and bring out the children of Israel from Egypt. And yes, we discussed is the second key, which is a chi only because of the rules of Beged Kefet, understood to be the same as the first one, like a second that, like a second description of mi anochi. Who am I that I should do A and do B? Or is it possible that these are two different concepts, phrases? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? Full stop. The trup kind of gives us a full stop there, or a half stop at nachta. And now a second question: should I? Am I able to remove the children of Israel from Egypt? That's where we left things off, right? Kind of hinting at where Rashi is going to go on that. So before we look at the Rashi on that, comments or thoughts on just the structure of that verse. And I think we had read several translations of it as well. No? Okay. So let's start reading the Rashi on it. Joel, do you want to read the Rashi on Mi Anochi? Joel, you there? I can't tell if you're trying to unmute.
Yeah, no, I'll skip. I don't have my book with me.
Okay. Larry, Diane, does one of you want to read the Rashi on verse 11?
Sure. Hold on. So that would be Vatalacha Eshlacha. Sorry.
Next verse. Mi Anochi.
All right. Got it there? Oh, Mi Anochi. Right. Oh, okay. Mani chashuv l'daber im hamlachim. So, what am I important to speak with the kings?
Right. So turn that into a good English sentence.
Well, when I translate the ma as a what, not as a who, but right. What is my importance that I can speak with kings?
Right. You almost have to read it like with a Yiddish intonation. Ma, what? What? Ani chashuv l'daber malachim. I'm important to speak to kings. Right. The ma is hard to translate as a what that continues in the phrase, but we get the point. So Rashi renders the mi anochi as a self-deprecation, right? Is it possible, God, that you see in me someone who can speak to royalty? Okay, so he puts, and well, at least in our edition, there's a comma there, which is where the et nachta is in the verse. And let's see how Rashi renders the second half.
Okay, v'chi otzi et bnei Yisrael. V'af im chashuv ani, ma zachu Yisrael, she'aseh lahem nes v'otzihem miMitzrayim. And even if I'm important, what is the merit of Israel that you'll make a for them and bring them out of Egypt?
Good.
Wait.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Larry or Diane, since you're both unmuted, what's your read of Rashi's answer? And on the way there, what's your sense of Rashi's question on the verse or read of the verse?
Well, Moses is assuming. Well, Rashi is assuming that Moshe is questioning his merit, but and the merits of the Israelites, but he's not questioning. For him, there's no question that it's God who's going to make the miracle, which was an issue that we had talked about, I think, last time in different translations, because the Pshat translation, at least my Pshat translation, is that Moses is going to be bringing out the people, the children of Israel from Egypt, and not God.
Right. So good. So there are several things happening in this comment. So Rashi is either consciously or unconsciously disabusing anyone of the notion that Moshe might think that by saying "V'chi otzi," shall I bring them out, that Moshe is suggesting that Moshe is the Redeemer and not God, right? I don't know if that was in Rashi's mind, but even if it's not in Rashi's mind, he's clearly not reading it that way.
Can I just mention that is in Aryeh Kaplan's mind, because his translation of the verse is, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" said Moses to God, period. "And how can I possibly get the Israelites out of Egypt?" So he's challenging Rashi in his translation of this verse by suggesting that, Moses was thinking that God was sending him to do the work all by himself, rather than Rashi saying that Moses understood that God was sending Moshe as his messenger, and that he was going to be the one with the power to create the events.
So that's Aryeh Kaplan?
Yeah. So
that read by Aryeh Kaplan strengthens the possibility that Rashi was alert to that and Dafka didn't want it to be read that way, maybe, right? It's also interesting that Rashi, not really quoting any midrash directly, is imputing to Moshe not only a lack of belief in his own abilities, but an early lack of belief in the Israelites' merit, right? We're almost seeing like a kernel of what the relationship between Moshe and the Israelites are going to be, between the Redeemer and the redeemed, right? We sometimes rhapsodize about, Moshe brought the Israelites out of Egypt, but and Moshe the great leader, but it wasn't always a great bond, right? And Moshe sometimes is defending the Israelites' merit and honor in the presence of God, but sometimes is very frustrated with the Israelites, and his first comments back to God, according to Rashi, is questioning whether or not they even deserve it. Now, what's Moshe's last interaction with the Israelites?
He was right. You can imagine Midrash. You can imagine Midrash on this where Moses would say, "These people, I tried to stand up for them, and what did they do? They accused me. They were going to turn me in. I had to run away. These are the people you want to save?"
Right. So it all begins with a technical question as to whether or not the predicate of the sentence is a continuation of the subject or a new-ish thought, right? And Rashi goes in to the latter, says it's a new-ish thought. It's a second question rather than part two of the first question. But what that leads to is a very different tenor in the conversation between Moshe and God, and the planting of a seed of the lack of pure harmony and mutual belief in one another between Moshe and the people, right? Moshe is concerned that the people won't trust him. He doesn't trust them so much. Diane, well, you're going to say something, and then I have some hands up.
Yeah. He also apparently doesn't trust himself so much, which is odd, given that, according to what we think the story is, he's been raised in the palace. So who better to go speak to Pharaoh than him? And yet he somehow thinks he doesn't merit speaking to kings, to Pharaoh, which is odd.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Diane. I've always read this Rashi like anticipating the self-deprecation that Moshe is about to articulate, but specifically that Rashi's putting into Moshe's mouth this question of who am I to speak to royalty? You can actually look at it backwards and say, and ask on that, why wouldn't he feel comfortable with it? That's his milieu. I never picked up on that.
Mm.
Great. Norm and Rachel, and then Joanna, and then Joel.
I just wanted to say I'm impressed with Aryeh Kaplan's translation in that he avoids the use of importance. Because when I read this sentence saying, am I important enough? I don't like that word. I think, what is my status that I should be speaking with kings? What is my status? I think is a better word than importance here, because
But Aryeh Kaplan is translating the verse, not the Rashi. It's in the Rashi, I believe.
Right.
You read Aryeh, Larry, you read Aryeh Kaplan's translation of the verse, right?
right, and in the verse we have importance also. So I really thought that's better without that word.
No, but the verse, I don't.
It doesn't. It's only in Rashi.
Right. The verse does not have the chashuv. The verse has an implication.
Yeah.
Can I? Should I? Right. Will I bring the people out of Egypt?
You're right.
But it's in Rashi that the notion of import comes up.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, Joanna, and then Joel.
Something really popped out at me as we read the Rashi, and the fact that, Rashi had, Dibur HaMatriel, his leading words, his quote from the Pasuk, a comment, and then Dibur HaMatriel again, the leading words from the Pasuk and a comment. And to me, what popped out at me is what Rashi is doing here, in my opinion, is if you look at the verse, you don't need the second chi. The verse would read perfectly well, Mi anochi ki elech al paro ve'otzi et bnei Yisrael mimitzrayim. So what I think is that once we have that second chi there, for Rashi, that really separates it into two separate different matters, and he now has to explain them as two separate different matters.
Excellent, Joanna. So what Joanna just did is basically she basically wrote a super commentary on Rashi there, the Siftei Chachamim, were one of the four classic super commentaries on Rashi. I don't know if they say that, but that's the very kind of thing they would say, right? If you read are trying to figure out exactly why Rashi is dissecting the verse this way, I'm going to tell you why, and I think you're spot on. I had never picked up on that either. That it's the presence of that second chi that opens up the possibility that two things are going on. Great. Joel.
So I'm reading the Rashi differently. Tell me if I'm wrong. Zachu could be earned or could be what have they gained? So this goes back to my comment from last week. In other words, okay, I'm probably not going to be successful, but even if I am successful, what have they gained? Now they're out in the middle of the desert.
Wow. Yes, to the Hebrew, like Liz, you can indeed read Zachu as you have to play with the tenses, right? You'd have to turn to what would they have gained, right?
Well, just like in English, what have they gained? What have they gained?
Yeah. Lovely question. I suspect that Rashi meant the former, but I can't prove it because Zachu could be read that way. What do other people think about Joel's possibility? Before I call on Barbara, what do people think about the notion of translating the Rashi as not have they merited it, but what's in it for them? Anyone? Does anyone have a translation of Rashi? I don't have an English translation of Rashi in front of me. Does anyone have an English translation of Rashi that gets anywhere near that? Sue, is your hand up?
My hand is up, and I have an English. It says, "Of what importance am I to speak with?" Wait.
That's the next line.
And how did Israel merit that a miracle be done for them? That's how this translation puts it in. But I was thinking it with what Joel said, and maybe it's the same thing, really. But in Hebrew, you would say that you zachu et pras, you would win a prize. So it's like, so I was thinking, God, it's kind of what have they won? There's something a little bit slightly different when you think about it as what have they won as opposed to what have they earned. And we speak like that, winning one's freedom. That in English we use language like that. So I don't know. There's some extra something there.
Is that what your hand was up for before also, or were you going to say something else?
No, it was about winning a prize. Zachu. It was about winning. It was about Zachu being earned and also having a winning is something that's, like that.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by this. I'm just looking at a couple of places online where I know that Rashi is translated into English, not that they're correct, but just to see if there's anyone that plays with it. Chabad translates it as merit. What merit do the Israelites have? And I forgot who did the translation of Rashi on Sefaria. So while I look that up, Barbara, go ahead.
As worthy.
Worthy. Okay, so most of
deserve.
Deserve.
That's in the art scroll. Deserve.
Barbara.
Okay, yeah, I actually kind of disagree with Diane, so I thought I'd. To me, Moshe had run away, was scared of being with had left the palace, had run away because of murdering the guard. And I'd be scared to go up to Pharaoh after that. They were on the lookout for him. They probably wanted to kill him. So I'd be scared of going up to Pharaoh at that point. That was all I wanted to say. Well, and then I just thought it was really interesting that Rashi brought this out as being a miracle that had been done for them, and that why should Israel merit? I thought that was really fascinating. That I don't see that at all in the verse, and I just don't figure out how Rashi could possibly have dreamed that up.
Right. So this is a situation where Rashi's comments on the next verse both rely on and illuminate Rashi's comments on this verse. So when we go very slowly, sometimes we lose some of that thread. I think, as Joanna said before, it's that second. It's not even a preposition. It's like how would you describe the particle of speech that key is? A article maybe, or no, not article. But whatever the word, however you describe the word key, it's the presence of that second one that suggests that there's another question lurking in Moshe's mind. But as you'll see, just a little bit of giving it away, that Rashi reads in the next verse, God answering two questions. So if God is answering two questions in the next verse, there must have been two questions in our verse rather than just two ways of asking the same question, right? Two ways of asking the same question is, who am I that I should go and that I should take them out of Egypt? But then the next verse would have two answers for a question only asked in one way. So maybe
the he is almost like a conjunction.
Conjunction.
Like the and carrying it on into the next paragraph.
That was the word I couldn't think of. Correct. Conjunction, junction. What's your function? If you grew up watching Schoolhouse Rock like I did. Okay. So then let's use that as an opportunity to jump into verse 12, because the comments in verse 12 are linked to the comments on verse 11. Carol, are you in a place where you can unmute and read?
Yes, I am.
I couldn't hear you, so I assume that's no.
Hello?
Okay. Yes.
I'm on a work meeting simultaneously.
Okay, we can't hear you, Carol, but I hope you can hear us as we continue going forward. Okay. Let's see. Leonard or Rebecca, you choose between the two of you. You want to read verse 12?
Okay, I guess it's me. Okay, 12. Vayomer ki ehyeh imach v'zeh lecha ha'ot ki anochi shalachticha lahotziacha et ha'am miMitzrayim ta'avdun et ha'Elohim al hahar hazeh.
Okay, and as you translate, Rebecca, and as everyone else kind of translates in their mind and or reads the translations, notice that this is not a verse with particularly hard vocabulary or even hard like structure, but it's hard to figure out, and this is what is the engine for Rashi's comment as to kind of what the cause and the effect are in this verse. What part of the verse is pushing another part of the verse? All the words seem to make sense, but how they string together is a bit of a puzzle, at least, and it's made more of a puzzle once we get to Rashi. Okay, so try to translate.
Okay. And he said, certainly I will be with you, and this for you is the sign. Mm-hmm. My thing says the token.
Okay.
That I have sent to you,
or that I have sent you.
Okay, that I have sent you in your bringing forth the people from Egypt, that you will serve God on this mountain.
Great. So again, they're common-ish roots, common-ish forms. Remember back in elementary school, at least when I grew up there, you had to map a sentence, right? And the subject and the predicate and the dependent clauses, and there was actually a formal way to do it up on the blackboard. It's very hard to do that to this verse, right? So the way Rebecca translated it is fine, but it still doesn't help us understand what part is leading another part. We know that God said, "I will be with you," parentheses. Interestingly, the Onkelos translates "I will be with you" not as "I will be with you," but va'amar arei yehe memri b'sa'adach. My word will be your help. Interesting. Doesn't say that in Hebrew, but that's how Onkelos is translating it into the Aramaic, almost kind of hinting at the future verses where Moshe is going to say that he is slow of speech. He doesn't have the words for it. Onkelos translates "I will be with you" as my word, memri, b'sa'adach, will be your help, will help you out. So God says, I will be with you. This is the sign. So then the question is, well, what is the sign? What is that colon? This is the sign, colon, and we're about to get as the sign? Or is my saying to you that I will be with you the sign? It's hard to know which is which. And even further complicated, ki anochi shalachticha, that I sent you. Is this saying that your sign is that I sent you? Or this is the sign that I sent you? Right? And now the bit here is kind of like in your bringing out the people from Egypt. Is that the sign? Is it continued from the previous phrase? And then what are we supposed to do with ta'avduna Elohim et al harazeh, that you will worship God on this mountain? So interesting that God is referring to God's self in the third person, in the third God, perhaps I should say. And is that just a prediction, or is that part of the sign? So all the words are rather simple, but stringing it together is very complicated. So we're going to linger on the pshat for a while. I see already some hands up. I'd love to hear your instinctual understanding as to what's being communicated here. Then we'll look at some translations, and then we'll look at the Rashi. Carol, no problem. I hope you get most of it. Okay, I see Larry, Diane, Renee, and then Norm and Rachel.
Well, first, Rashi, not Rashi, but the verse, I think, makes it very clear that there's at least some confusion about who is going to be doing the freeing.
Okay.
Because I have too many sources open. Looking for the, Behotziacha. So it is Moses who is going to be doing the freeing, at least arguably. That's one point. The second point is there clearly is some, I don't want to say confusion, but there are multiple ideas floating around here, which were inferred in the previous verse as well. And actually we talked about a long time ago. Where did this happen? And the inference is this is happening right at Sinai.
Geographically, you're saying, right? Got it. Okay, right?
Well, that's the sign. The sign is that this is happening at Sinai, and this is exactly the same place. And we know that's where the law will be given. And when the people see the fire and the lightning and the thunder and everything like that. Now, that's after the fact. It doesn't help them to explain to Pharaoh or even to the people right now. But somehow the sign is the geography.
Okay, good. So then finish the thought. The sign that what is the geography? The sign of what? The sign that this is real?
Well, don't ask me that question, but the sign that Moses is being sent by God, because God has revealed himself exactly in this place.
Okay, good. So Larry, I think your read is, if the previous question has Moshe questioning, who am I, and do I have an actual force behind me? The answer is, don't worry. It's kind of one question, one answer. The answer is, don't worry, I'll be with you. And what's your sign? The sign is that when you eventually take them out of the land of Egypt, you're going to come back to this very place, and I'm going to reveal Torah, and they're going to worship here, and that's how you're going to know that you were not sent on a fool's mission, right? Is that basically your pshat?
Yes.
Good. So I think that's actually a totally workable shot. It's actually a rather simple shot. simple, not simplistic, but simple, plain pshat, that the previous verse has one question, not the two that Rashi suggests, and this verse has one longish answer. Moshe, you're looking for some certainty that this is real? Don't worry. Down the line, you'll know retroactively that what you were seeing here was not your imagination. Good, totally workable. Who was next? Renee,
Rabbi?
I think.
Rabbi,
yes.
Can I say something first?
Please.
Okay. I want to focus on how God is talking about God's self. So one could read the first Ayeh as God talking about God's self, as that's a piece of God's name, his intimate name. And then God refers to God's self as Anochi. But when the people are going to worship God, then they're going to worship Elohim. It's fascinating. I don't know what it all means, but
yeah, good, very good. Particularly as if you want just a peek ahead, we're not going to read it. It's two verses from now in verse 14 that we get the famous "I am," I am that I am, Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh, where
right.
God announces God's name in the form of Eheyeh. So you're suggesting that the verse might be representing God as being aware of the different names and therefore emanations of God. But the one that's worshipped is Elohim. The one that's going to bring them out is a more intimate Ehiyeh or Anochi. Great. Renee, and then Norm and Rachel, and then I'll look at the next set of hands.
I think it's kind of legitimizing the last verse because it's making it seem as if Israel is being birthed as a nation, and if Israel is being birthed as a nation, then it makes Moshe's position more important as well.
Yeah, and it's definitely a birth moment, and I think that this question about whether Moshe is doing the redeeming or God is doing the redeeming, it might be a worthy substantive question, and it might be a distinction without a difference in the sense that God really is, indeed, sending Moshe in to do the task, the task of hotza'ah, of the removal, even if God is kind of mapping out the whole thing. Before I call on Norm and Rachel, Larry, Baruch Shekivanta, Everett Fox reads it almost exactly the way you do, right? One long answer to one long question, right? So the way he reads the question, verse 11 is, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? One question. And the answer is, God said, indeed, I will be there with you, Eyeh Mach. And this is the sign for you that I myself have sent you, : what's the sign? When you brought the people out of Egypt, you will, he puts in parentheses, all, because ta'avdun is plural, you will all serve God by this mountain, right? So you, Moshe, are wondering, is this a figment of your imagination? No, it's real, but you're not going to know it's real until then. But you will certainly know then that this is real. Right? So that's how Everett Fox is reading the Hebrew. Norm, Rachel.
By the time we finish Shmos, B'Yameinu, it'll be routine that God and Moshe have conversations. But this is still the very first conversation they've had. They're still standing, or at least Moshe is still standing by this burning bush. I think this is the sign, means this burning bush that isn't being consumed is the sign. He needs a sign now, not just a promise in the future from a voice. And I think that the burning bush is the sign.
Good. So Baruch Shekivanta, you kind of anticipated Rashi 1a, which we'll read at some point today if we're lucky. Good. That's another.
Okay. I want to disagree with the idea that this mountain means the same exact location as the burning bush. Last I heard, Moshe was out with the sheep somewhere in Midian, and that Sinai is not in Midian. I realize this may sound really picayune, but I have to think of signs and wonders as not being as geographically specific as going to that same piece of ground as the burning bush.
Yeah.
Okay.
And particularly as you think about the at least oral and phonological connection between Sneh and Sinai, right? I don't know if they're actually the same root, but they're certainly evocative of one another. I love that Larry and Diane are, I don't know who wrote that, Larry or Diane, but if it's Larry, I love that you're disagreeing with yourself, which is to read part of this verse as answering a second question from the previous verse. You want to know what their merit is? Their merit, they're being liberated so they can be in relationship with me. So it's really my merit, not their merit. Joanna, Barry, Rick. Oh, you muted and then you unmuted and then muted yourself.
Just a comment about the tenses that we refer to God in. In the Ten Commandments, the same thing happens. It starts by referring to God in the first person and then switches at commandment number 3 to the third person. And we do it also every time we make a bracha. We start referring to God in the second person, Baruch Atah, and then we get to Asher Kidshanu b'mitzvotav. So there's something interesting that happens there that I don't know how to further explain, but it's just an observation.
Yeah. I remember the first time I was aware of that in the structure of a bracha, and it just struck me as weird that I didn't realize it beforehand, and that I could never not be aware of it. That we switch tenses mid-blessing every single time. This may sound like a strange association. It reminds me, my father, who is professionally a psychiatrist, but also a very accomplished musician and composer, and he loved musical theater and good musical theater. He loved Leonard Bernstein, and he loved West Side Story. And I remember as a kid, he thought that the I Like to Be in America was one of the most interesting and complicated songs because as a rarity, it switched, I'm going to get the words wrong, it switched meter mid-song, because usually a song is either in a 1-2-3, like waltz-like rhythm, or a 2 or a 4. But it's uncommon that you go from a beats that go in triplicate to beats that go in even numbers in the same song. And he said, I like to be in America is 1-2-3, 1-2-3, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2-3, 1-2-3, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. I remember him saying that throughout the house, that midway through one bar, you've moved from a waltz, like a polka, 3 beats, to syncopated even number beats. And that was complex composing and interesting composing. And we do that not in beats, but in tense in every bracha. And yes, it's happening here in this verse. And maybe that's, I don't know, maybe there is something about that represents the theology, the nimble theology we're supposed to be having. Great. Thank you for that comment, Joanna. Barry and then Rick.
Okay, a couple of comments, but before I make the comments, there's some background chirping noises. My smoke alarm is a battery. So just ignore that, please. So a couple of comments. What's the merit? We've been led to believe until now the merit is the forefathers and the promises made to Abraham that after so many years, blah, blah, blah. And the other merit is that God has seen the suffering and it's time. But now the merit is something different, and I agree with Larry. This is very interesting that the merit is that God wants the people to come up there and give the Torah, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
A second comment: I deal in financial contracts in which one party is requiring the other party to do something. That there's going to be some transfer of financial amount. And the party that's going to receive it is supposed to sign something, and then they'll see the proof. Well, the second party, they want to see the proof first before they sign, and that's what's going on here. Where's the proof? Well, you won't see the proof until you do it first. And after you do it, then you'll see the proof. And
that's a great comment, Barry. And there's no way, we might start it today, but there's no way we're going to finish today because it's a very long Rashi. The end of the Rashi, which we probably will get to next week, goes directly to that last thing that you said about what does it mean to say someone, here's your sign, but it's not here yet, right? Like, Zelacha ha'ot, this is the sign. In English, or maybe in all languages, we'd assume that means it's here. But one way of reading the verse is that the sign, this is your sign then in the future, right? That a sign will be coming. It's not here right now.
Another comment on that, though, the bush is not enough. Yeah, okay, I see this bush, but that's not enough of proof. I need a real proof of this is going to be.
Yeah, thank you, Barry. Rick, and then Joanna, and then Stevie.
Hi. So going along the lines of what Norm started with, the oat, the burning bush, that little phrase, v'zeh lecha ha'ot, kind of stands by itself, the munach and the zakef katam. But anyway, it could have been lachem. It could have been, this is the sign to them, meaning the or to you plural, to the whole people, or it could have been to him, to Pharaoh. So there's, I think we should be aware that there's three things going on. What is Moses going to tell himself about what's going on? What's Moses going to tell the Israelites, and what's Moses going to tell Pharaoh? I looked ahead as to what Moses tells Pharaoh the first time, and I never saw it before, but it's really interesting. But I know we're not supposed to read ahead. But it's chapter 5, and it's weird. So can I ask it?
Go ahead. Ask away.
Okay, because if you look, anyway, the purpose was just to see, well, what does he tell Pharaoh? So if you look at chapter 5, at the end of verse 3, he goes, let us go so we can pray to God, lest he lights on us with pestilence or with the sword. So it just, I never saw that before, that he's warning Pharaoh, but he's saying us. So he's including himself and the people of Israel. You got to do this, Pharaoh, or else calamity is going to come on all of us. And I just wanted to say that instead of waiting 2 months. But
you're very optimistic if you think we're going to get to chapter 5, verse 3 in 2 months.
Yeah. I like to be optimistic. But the v'zeh lecha, this is the ode to you, not to lachem, not to lahem with a hey. It's to Moses.
So I'll say it again, Baruch Shekivanta. Rashi is troubled by the same thing on that verse as you are, and it's an interesting resolution, but we'll get there in August. But Rashi also wants to know why it's Yifka Ignu, lest it smite us, and not Yifka Acha, and not smite you.
Yeah.
And going back to our verse, and kind of linking your comment with Joanna's comment, it's not just that God refers to God's self in several different persons, first person, and third person, but God also refers to the people of Israel in the second person and the third person, right? Vayomer kiyeh imach, I will be with you, and then you. This is your sign that I sent you in your bringing out the people from Egypt. The people there are in the third person, and then to Avdun, you, plural, as if God is addressing the people in the second person, because otherwise it would have been ta'avod, not ta'avdun. So there's a lot of mixing and matching here of tense and of what we call in English person, first person, second person, and third person. And the people aren't even there, but God is addressing them through Moshe somehow. Okay, Joanna, and then Stevie, I see your hand was up and it's down. Raise it again if you want to talk.
Addressing the question of v'zeh lecha ha'ot, and is that an oat that is here and now, the burning bush, or some future not yet seen oat? I'm I'm wondering if it's the future and if what God is trying to do is to first inculcate Moses and then the rest of the people to be a people of faith in a world where they constantly had a representation of the God in front of them. You know, not to have an image become such a foremost principle of monotheism that didn't really exist yet for the people. So he's starting to kind of build Moshe and then the people up to be people of faith. You won't always see something so physical in front of you and right in front of you. You have to trust and know that it's coming.
Fascinating. This is the sign, and it's not something I can show you. That's great. The Rambam believed that the whole sacrificial system was a concession on God's part to wean the Israelites, who were steeped in Egyptian idolatry, towards monotheism, but by means of an intermediary where there was a something. There was a place where they could meet God, and there was a gift they could give God, and it was infantile theology, infantile monotheism, and eventually the Rambam said, you know, that this is a very complicated theology, that the destructions of the temple were obviously calamities, but were part of the plan because God never intended the sacrificial system to last forever, right? It's a puerile way of doing God worship, right? So you're suggesting something that's a cousin to that God is recognizing that it's not going to be easy for Moshe or the Israelites to be in relationship with a God they can't see and they can't touch. So God gets Moshe's attention with something that seems miraculous, but is now beginning to plant in Moshe's idea that the sign is some amorphous faith moment in the future, not something I can prove to you this moment. That's a really fascinating read.
And as you just said that, I had a connection to what you were teaching at Shabbat Mincha about the Kruvim. And my reaction to that, right? Like, what is this in light of the second commandment? And now I'm wondering if the Kruvim are also a concession, because what's running through my head now is the resemblance of the Kruvim and their wings to a sphinx, and God's realization that there needed to be some kind of concession to the people. They weren't ready to be totally these people in the total abstract. And this was a way of having a concession in an acceptable framework.
Very nice. Yeah, so what Joanna's referring to is I taught several comments on the verse from Parshat Truma that we're going to read this Shabbat on the Kruvim, the cherubs, and these, at least according to most iconography, baby-faced half-angel thingies with wings that were on top of the Aron HaKodesh, and kind of a strange thing in a tradition that shies away, at the very least, from representing God in imagery. So maybe these are all, what's the phrase in child development? Transitional objects, right? Transitional objects. They're all blankies. They're all blankies on the way to eventually a more abstract understanding of reality. Great. Thank you for that, Joanna. Stevie, yes? No? I don't see your hand up anymore. I'm going to assume that's a no. Okay. Rebecca, you're still up. This is a wonderful Rashi, a very wordy Rashi, right? We sometimes have to throw in a lot of words to make Rashi make sense. This is the opposite. Eventually, and I don't even know how far we're going to get, Rashi writes a little sermon or an extended paragraph rather than speaking very, very tersely. Why? I don't know. He could have said what he needed to say in fewer words. It's just interesting when you get used to the rhythm of Rashi when it changes abruptly. So let's jump into it. I wanted to say something on what Joanna said 20 minutes ago. She mentioned the phrase Dibur HaMatchil, a phrase that I've used several times in this class. Dibur, the word Matchil, that begins. It's the Jew speak way of referring to the phrases in our translation, in our book, in bold, that begin a comment by a commentator, in Rashi or anyone else, right? So it's the words from the verse upon which the commentator is commentating. Much has been written about the question about whether or not the Diburei HaMatchil in Rashi or elsewhere are his or not. Most people believe that Rashi's original commentary excluded the Diburei HaMatchil, and then the Diburei HaMatchil were inferred by later editors, kind of guessing as to what words in the verse Rashi was commenting on, but without certainty. So that's its own game. And particularly as we think about how then we're doing it backwards, because now we're trying to really understand Rashi based on the Diburei HaMatchil, but the Diburei HaMatchil might have been themselves guesses by editors and not what Rashi originally intended. So there is layers of guess upon guess in terms of what specifically in each verse Rashi is responding to, and that is very apparent in what we're about to read, because there are several places where Rashi interrupts Rashi's self with Diburei HaMatchil, and I would say maybe, or it's an editor interpolating that. Okay, so Rebecca, Vayomer ki ehyeh imach.
Vayomer ki ehyeh imach. Heshivu al Rishon, ve'al Acharon.
Okay, so translate that first, and instead of Heshivu, which it could be without the vowels, this is Heshivo, Heshiv oto.
Okay. And he said, certainly I will be with you. He answered him about the first question first, and on the last question last.
Right. So the first thing Rashi says is he speaks directly to Everett Fox and Larry Herman and says, you're wrong, right? There were two questions on the last verse, and there are two answers in this verse. And if you, reader, are confused about how to graph this verse, just map it up. Connect the first part of this verse to the first question in the last verse, and the second part of this verse to the second question in the last verse, and to say that more explicitly, the first question in the last verse is, who am I, right? That I'm worthy. So the first answer has to answer that question. The second question in the last verse is that I, why should I even bring them out of Egypt? And so the second half of this verse has to answer that. This reminds me of my favorite, 9-second scene in all of TV. What was that show in the 60s with Leslie Nielsen? Mod Squad or something like that. The farcical actor Leslie Nielsen, there's one scene where all of a sudden he bursts into an office space, and there's a guy behind the office, and the guy says to him, "Who are you? And how'd you get in here?" And Leslie Nielsen says, "I'm a locksmith, and I'm a locksmith," which I think is just brilliant, terse writing. So that's exactly what's happening here in Rashi, right? Two questions, two answers in a row. I'm a locksmith, and I'm a locksmith. Okay, now he tries to make that more clear. Go ahead.
Okay. She'amarta, mi anochi ki elech el paro, lo shelcha hi ki im mishali, ki ehyeh imach.
Period, or at least maybe a period, because certainly the punctuation is an editorial choice, but let's put a period there and deal with what you just read.
Okay. As to regards what you have said, who am I that I should go unto Pharaoh? Of what importance? Wait.
Now you're on the lo shelchahi.
Yeah. It is not your going, but it is mine, for I will be with you.
Okay, period. So let's kind of parse that, because even that is complex. So we know that Rashi is saying that the first part of the last verse, this sounds like a Groucho Marx skit, the first part of the second party. The first part where you said, Moshe, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? I'm responding to you, Rashi is saying, lo shelchahi, this is interesting grammar. It is not yours. The it in Rashi's sentence is feminine, which makes us ask the question, what's the it? Right? Is the it, what's the implied feminine noun, which is yours, which is the he? Is it shlichut, right? The actual sending. It's hard to know what Rashi is referring to by the he, but whatever it is, Moshe, this is not your individual burden. It's actually mine. ki eyeh imcha, for I will be with you. So if you, Moshe, are concerned that you're going to stand before Pharaoh and be lacking merit because who are you to speak to kings? It's not your mission, it's mine, and I'm going to be with you. Okay? So whether or not you think that's the right read of the verse, just want to make sure everyone gets that what Rashi's saying there. Norman, Rachel?
I just wanted to share that Silverman interpolates the words an undertaking so that he translates this part as, it is not an undertaking of yours, but it is partly mine, for I will be with you.
An undertaking, right? Because there has to be some kind of a thing which is being referred to as yours, or not yours, but mine. And whatever the thing is, it's feminine, right? Joanna?
Two things. In the text, I see it says that zelecha ha'ot. But is ot a feminine word? Could it be the ot, and that's how we will know that I am with you?
Is otot umoftim? Is ot the plural of ot is otot? I don't remember. Ot hi leolam, yes. Ot hi leolam in Vishamra. So ot is feminine. So keep going with that then.
So I don't have all that much more to go with that, but that I think that's what that he possibly is referring to. But my second comment is, while the individual verses are difficult to parse out, not only is 12 a mapping onto verse 11, but as we were saying that, 11 is a mapping onto verse 10, because verse 10 is ve'ata lecha ve'eshlachacha. So, mi'anochi ki elech, there's a mapping there. And then in the second part of the verse, ve'hotzei et ami ve'chi otzi et b'nei Yisrael.
Yeah. This would be a great set of verses to be doing in Pilch Hall with the blackboard, where we could actually write them out and draw arrows and see the different possibilities for how each phrase is connected to another phrase. Great. So I think we sort of have shot on what Rashi said so far. We're getting close to the end of class today, and we're not going to get close to finishing this Rashi, but we can read a little bit more. But I see Larry and Diane's hand up.
Diane's first.
Okay, so I now understand that this is God's mission. This is not Moshe's mission, according to what Rashi has said.
Right.
So it's almost as though God needs to, it's like some science fiction story where God needs a human body in order to approach Pharaoh, so Pharaoh will understand. It's kind of weird. If you think about I am with you, what exactly does that mean? I don't know where to go with that, but it's a different image.
Yeah.
Can I like your humor in the Leslie Nielsen line, and I like what Joanna said. And it's not only these three verses; it's the next two verses too. This is almost like the Abbott and Costello, who's on first. And when they switch from here, we got the two things: is who am I, and who are they to be freed? And then we are going to switch in a minute to who are you, God? When we've already previewed who is God? So this is all about questions. They're talking across purposes to each other almost. But I do have a question about the Rashi, going back to the translation that we just, or the words of Rashi. Rashi is saying, She'amarta mi anochi ki elech et paro. When you said, who am I that you're sending me to, that I'm going to Pharaoh? Lo shelcha hi ki im mi shali. It's not, she is not for you, whatever the she is, right? Ki im mi shali. And I'm having a hard time with that.
As opposed to Shelley?
No, the im, right, is the with, right?
Yeah, no, im with a with is an ayin.
Oh, so it's okay. It's that.
Ki im means like, but rather. It's hard to, you can't translate ki im into English word for word. It means, but it's a switcheroo. It's a but rather. Rather, it's not this, but rather that.
Understood. So then I'm going to ask a question which it can't possibly be, but it's almost as if this is an answer to my question about who's freeing the Bnei Israel.
Yeah.
It's almost as if this is the answer to the second question. It's not your job to free them. Rather, it's my job to free them.
Yeah.
But I'll be with you.
Right. So we're going to leave it there. And let's remember next week that Rebecca is on, because I want to give her the zechut, speaking of meriting, of finishing this Rashi. In the chat is the... it's not Mod Squad. It's the Police Squad little video of Amalak Smith, and it's worthy. It makes me laugh every single time. And we'll pick up on this next time. And at the end of this Rashi, my prediction, Zelacha'od, this is your sign, is that we'll understand what Rashi is saying, but not necessarily understand the verse better, because I think he actually complicates our understanding of the verse rather than clarifying it. But we'll see when we get there. Have a great Wednesday, and be safe and be healthy. See you all soon.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.